Hello, today we are doing the broker machine from Hack the Box. It's a Linux machine and it's recommended in both the TJNull and LainKusanagi list to prepare for the OSCP. So let's get started. As always, we start with a port scan. And I'm using the auto recon tool with the recursive flag to enable recursive directory enumeration. And since port scanning takes some time, I run it before and we can have a look at the results. To do so, I'm starting a Python HTTP server in my directory. And then we can browse the results in our web browser. So we found a few open ports. We found 22 for SSH and we found port 80 for web server. And we can check the directory enumeration, but nothing was found here. We can also check the other open ports. So AutoRecon identified this port as a web server, but no directories found. Also, this port was identified as a web server, but nothing found here. We can begin with exploring what's running on port 80. And we see a login field, but we don't have any credentials. So we can try default credentials like admin, admin password, admin123456, and so on. And let's start with admin, and it worked. So we can see that ActiveMQ is running on this port, and we see it's running with this version here. And now we can check on Google if we can find any public exploits. And we can see there's an exploit for remote code execution on GitHub. We could try running this exploit, but I don't have Golang installed right now, so I'm checking if there's something available in, for example, Python. And we found a version in Python. And to run this exploit, we need to start a netcat listener, generate a malicious XML file, start a HTTP server, and then run the exploit. We can also check the CVE. We see the vulnerability is in the Java OpenWire protocol, and the attacker can run arbitrary shell commands by manipulating serialized class types. So it's a deserialization attack. We can also have a look at the Python code. So here we see the config file in XML is generated with the reverse shell. And here we can see how the exploit is sent to the ActiveMQ server. And we also saw this port in our port scan. So let's try this. We clone the repository. First, we need to generate the XML file. And we provide the IP of our Kali machine and our netcat listener port. Then we can also start our netcat listener. We also need to start another Python HTTP server, and this time on port 8181. And now we can run the exploit. We give it the server IP, our local IP with port, and the file name of the config file. And it did not work because we started the HTTP server in the wrong directory. Let's try again. And we see we got the shell back. It looks like the shell is not stable, so we just try it again. And this time it seems to work. And we found our first flag, the user flag. And we can now start enumerating on this machine to find a way to escalate our privileges. Instead of running automated tools like LinPiece, for example, we can do some basic checks, and one of these basic checks is to see if we can run anything with sudo permissions. And we can run nginx. So we can go to GTFO bins and see how we can exploit this. So we see there are three possibilities, and we are using the library load. We need to create a config file, and here we specify a path to a shared object that we want to load. And then we start our nginx and give it this config file. And our payload in the shared object will be a shell that will be spawned up on starting the nginx server. So we created our shared object. We created our config file, which is stored in the temp directory, and same for the lib. So we need to move this there as well. And now we can run our nginx, but we can see it's failing. And it's failing because it's expecting a semicolon. So we can repeat the previous step, and this time we add the semicolon here. We start the nginx, and we are root. And we can see the root flag. I hope you enjoyed the video and see you next time.